Coach, thanks for joining me today on this Simple Coach to Coach interview. Appreciate you taking the time. I was very excited when you said you would interview, especially after my visit to your beautiful, beautiful campus, which you can see on the Fields of Dreams I did from Immaculata. But thank you very much. I know it gets to be a busy time, crazy time, so I appreciate you taking the time.
No, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
All right, so I'll start off with the basics. You're obviously not from here. If no one,
what gives that away?
yeah. So I'm just curious, what's your soccer journey been like, and how did you end up at Immaculata?
Yeah. So obviously I'm English. Grew up over there until I was 24. Typical kind of English soccer player story, I guess, in that bounced around the semi-pro pyramid for a number of years, had overlapped coaching with playing. I am a Tottenham Hotspur fan, and I did some work for Arsenal, so that was pretty painful for me.
Oof.
But
Does
yeah,
anybody like you in England? Is that why you're here?
I think after that, the other Spurs fans hated me. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, did some work with Arsenal and then West Brom.
Mm-hmm.
And was really kind of looking for more of an opportunity to coach full time. So moved over, on short term basis initially. Met an American girl. That the kind of typical English story, I guess. But in terms of the coaching aspect, I'd worked for a couple of clubs within New Jersey. A friend of mine had taken over the program here. Asked me to be his assistant coach. So that would have been 2018. We won our first conference title in 2019. That was the first title in program history.
Wow.
He moved on during COVID, and I was asked to take the program on from there. So yeah, been here now since 2018, head coach since 2020, kind of 2021.
Yeah, because you were more probably a therapist during COVID than you were a coach.
Yeah, I mean, having to wait about 15 months to coach your first game as a head coach was a challenge. Yeah, it was definitely an interesting time. I think everybody was in a similar boat, right?
Yeah.
Trying to keep athletes as active and engaged as we can with the restrictions we faced. So yeah, it was definitely more virtual.
Yeah.
Even when we could get back on the field, initially, we reopened as a school and then closed again a month later.
Oh my gosh.
So it was a kind of really short 2-week, 3-week
Mhm.
training burst, and then that was it. So, yeah, that was a kind of challenge initially.
All right, first I have to ask you, where is your office? Because I actually went looking for your office and I could not find it when I was there. Is it in the
So,
the gym building that has the theater in it?
yes, so from like the theatre,
Mm-hmm.
end of the corridor and downstairs, and I'm
Yeah.
opposite the pool deck.
I went, there was like a little side basketball court that had athletic offices, but it said there was only for coaches or whatever. And so I just I'm not going to go that way. But
Yeah, that's more our athletic administration,
okay.
and then head coaches are kind of dotted around the building.
Mhm.
So I'm downstairs.
All right, so I gotta ask you. We're gonna go totally down rabbit holes. I can totally see it now. Can I just ask you, because this is something that weighs on me a little bit. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you've been on both sides of the Atlantic with soccer. Could This is for college soccer, these types of athletes that I don't want to, that are, let's just say, very rarely gonna turn pro, right? They might have the opportunity, but for the most part, don't. What, what are some of the key differences? Let me ask, why do people? This is my latest perception. Why do so many people look to England and say this is the greatest place for soccer ever? And I'm a fan, don't get me wrong, of the EPL. I get it. But I think
Yeah,
more people look at it more from a structure standpoint. They think they got it all, that England has it all going on, which I have a hard time believing that they do. But Just your perspective. I don't know. I rambled there, so I apologize. But
No, I mean, I think the I suppose the first positive in the English system is the academies.
yeah,
So I say positive. The flip side of that is the smaller clubs, the semi-pro clubs, the township equivalent clubs are are always going to struggle.
yeah,
But the pathway for young players over there is more set out, more established,
hmm,
and there's less competition.
yeah,
You have what I would call football, rugby, and cricket.
yeah,
But particularly for guys over there, that really is it. So football only really competes with rugby in our
hmm,
season in England.
hmm,
So I think there are a lot more opportunities to focus specifically from a younger age. Here straight away, you obviously have soccer, basketball,
yeah,
football, lacrosse is growing. So I think sport here is, great that you get more opportunity to play a variety of sports, but it becomes harder to kind of concentrate on a sport like soccer and specialize, I guess, at a younger age.
yeah, hmm,
So I think that access to higher level training from a younger age is a big part of it.
hmm,
And then the other side is the money in the game, right? From
yeah,
Premier League clubs, Championship
yeah,
clubs, it's going to be difficult for that money to ever exist here.
yeah,
Again, trying to compete with NFL and Major League Baseball and things, you don't have that in England.
hmm,
So whether that's the money from the owners, whether that's the TV money, the money from the FA, it's everything's kind of focused to develop the game there.
yeah.
Whereas here you're developing 4 or 5 games
I
all the
think,
time.
yeah, very true, very true. Okay, sorry, totally unrelated to
No,
college
sorry,
soccer.
just to add to it, the flip side is if you look at rugby in England,
Uh huh.
even Premiership rugby is really struggling right now.
Yeah,
And that's because the flip side is rugby's trying to compete with football there, and
yeah,
it's going to be a losing battle. So it's sad
yeah,
to
yeah,
see, but football kind of monopolizes the market there.
yeah. I would think too. Just, I mean, look, the only reason why I think like the EPL is the EPL as we envision it now is because what do they make, like $1 billion a year uh, from just TV revenue, and they haven't even started selling tickets, right? And I
And
think
it's the
that's a big
international TV
advantage.
revenue.
Yeah, yeah,
In England, here, for example, you can watch, if I take a Saturday, the 7:30 a.m. game,
hmm,
then you get the 10 a.m. games, and
yeah,
then the 12:30 game. Well,
yeah,
that 10 a.m. / 3 p.m. in England time slot can never be televised there.
yeah,
So that international market brings in more money in ways that they can't do, within England.
yeah,
And it's all because of a highlights program and rights for that.
yeah, yeah,
So even that side of it has just grown,
yeah,
more
tremendously.
than you would have imagined 10 years ago.
So you couldn't watch a Arsenal live game? Like if Arsenal was playing from 10 to 3?
So if that was what our 10 o'clock on the East
Yep.
Coast here is 3 p.m. in England,
Yeah.
those games cannot be televised in England. So they'll
Really?
always televise the early game and the late game,
Uh-huh.
but the 3 o'clock on a Saturday can't be broadcast live. And there's a highlights program on a Saturday night, and
Uh-huh.
it's part of the TV package there that they get the highlights for those games first, and the right to
Before
broadcast those.
See, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Anyhow. All right, so back to you. You're in let's just say you're in what? It's fair to say you're in like year 3, 4ish of your Immaculata head coaching job. Considering
Yeah,
COVID, that
yeah, I
crazy
would
sort
say
of
year
yeah.
3, yeah.
Do, when you took over, I mean, you had to fill for your friend who was there, but were you hired for a purpose? Were they kind of like, hey, we want you to get Immaculata on the map, we want you to win, whatever those things are, like, or was it just literally, hey, you're the next guy in line, why don't you come on in?
No, I think from 2018 to 2019, we had really focused on kind of developing the relationship with our guys.
Mm-hmm.
And initially, I'll be honest, year 1, for example, there was very little tactical information.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to kind of change the culture,
Mm-hmm.
for how we wanted to run things. We restructured training a little bit differently from how the guys that had been there were used to it. And obviously at this point we hadn't really brought in a recruitment class of our own.
Mm-hmm.
And I think winning a championship within 2 years kind of showed success for our vision and our model, our way of doing things. So it kind of felt like I guess I was the natural guy to take over.
Right.
The challenge there is you take over a program and then we're all in lockdown. My
Yeah.
first game, I think we only had 2 kids who started the conference final when we won it in 2019. Only 2 kids were still in the program. So at
Oh my
that point,
gosh.
it's a complete reset.
Yeah, yeah. Well, all right. W- And how much do you think you've progressed? I mean in terms of your program, like how much do you think of it as your program, and are there still things that you're, whether it's the team culture or whatever tactics, that you still think is a work in progress? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like any coach is going to tell you it's always a work in progress
Right.
because the cyclical nature of college sport.
Hmm.
Um, I think there's a challenge stepping up from an assistant coach to a head coach and trying to put your mark on a program. But the great thing was the previous coach always gave us ownership of various aspects.
Hmm.
So, for example, we do a lot of functional training. We break our guys into our attacking unit, our defensive unit. So, as the assistant coach, I led the defensive side of things. The previous coach was great in giving us ownership of our areas of the program without micromanaging. So I felt pretty, prepared from that standpoint. I did bring some of my own guys in terms of assistant coaches,
Hmm.
so that helps again, kind of put your mark on it as a head coach.
Yeah.
Um, Tactically, we're very much a work in progress.
Hmm.
I have a clear identity of how I want the game to be played. I have my non-negotiables, and then we kind of build a game model from there and a kind of periodized training plan around that. It takes a lot of work to kind of get to that aspect, I guess.
Hmm.
In terms of the culture of the program, I think it really was just continuing the work we started.
Yeah.
In that
Yeah.
first 2 years, I didn't think I needed to change anything from that sense.
Hmm. All right, so I love the term. What are the non-negotiables that you have that you could share, and that they're not like one of your teams that you have to play next year uses it against you in their motivational speech?
No, do you know what? I never worry about people are going to see film on us anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't really see the need to to hide anything.
Hmm.
For us, if we're going up against Newman, who won our conference last year, we've
Hmm.
seen them 5 or 6 times, and they've seen us 5 or 6 times.
Right, right.
Yeah. So for me, my non-negotiables are going to be that we're always going to be on the field possession based. So we are going to try and build from the back. We're going to try and keep the ball through the phases of the field, play with some patience, and look for our opportunities to break lines and go forward. We're going to be attack minded. That was my biggest challenge last year. I want to attack with certain numbers across our front line and our second line, and we're always going to try and overload that final third of the field. And then my last step, and we haven't really got here yet, is we're going to be proactive defensively. So again, I'll put my English hat on. I call it front foot football.
Hmm.
Everything we do, we want to do from a front foot positive perspective. Um, Whether that's controlling possession in the attacking half of the field, getting numbers forward, creating chances, or even pressing when we lose the ball.
Hmm.
So yeah, my non-negotiables would be possession-based, attack-minded, proactive defensively.
Yeah, very good. Um, all right, so knowing all this, like, I mean, obviously, I think to certain, you're continuing on this trajectory. Knowing that, how how would you say 2023 was in that regard?
Great question, because if you look at our record, not great.
Hmm.
Ties. I think we were on 7. We didn't win anywhere near as many games as we would like. That's probably the biggest challenge as a coach, is to try and not get too obsessed with records and try and focus on the process. I'll be the first to admit that that was my biggest down point last year. Is
Hmm.
when we were struggling in the early part of the season, I kind of moved away a little bit from who I wanted us to be. Um, and then we had to re-establish that, in that kind of middle part of the season. Um, but it's, if I'm going to coach at this level, I want to enjoy how my team plays. So being true to that is going to be key. There'll be seasons where it goes well and it's easy to keep to that, and seasons like last year where it didn't go as well and it's difficult to keep to that.
Yeah.
But I'll be the first to admit to say our record was nowhere near where we want it to be. We don't want to make up numbers. We want to make semi-finals and finals and win championships. And yeah, with that thinking, it was nowhere near what we wanted.
Well, I just the easy one. I look at your schedule, and I mean you're close. I always say when you tie or you lose by a goal, you're close, right? It's just, can you get that different margin next year and flip those scores in your favor, right? And you're close because for the most part, you lost the games you lost by a goal.
Yeah.
Or you tied, right? It looks like you didn't have problems scoring, like you could score. It's just for whatever reason, right?
I mean we were competitive in every game for sure.
Yeah.
And our conference, Newman won it, we tied them. Cabrini were beaten in the final, we tied them. We beat Marymount, and then they beat us in playoffs. It's about where our conference is. Every kind of game is decided by a goal.
Yeah.
And it is, I'll be honest, it's really difficult to beat the top teams twice within a season. So if you look through historically, somebody who might have lost in conference a game or two then ends up winning the championship. So we're not far away. I think our record could easily have been 8-9 wins, for example. But we have some work to do, I guess, mentality wise as well. Focusing on the process, our style of play, and trusting that that's going to turn those ties to wins. And that's kind of going to be our aim moving forward.
Do you think that was your biggest problem, issue? Was I hate to say like killer instinct, but do you think that was you were lacking in that department?
Yeah, I think to a degree. It was a frustrating season in I suppose every coach is going to say we left a lot of goals out there. But I felt like it was taking us too many good opportunities to convert those to goals. There weren't many games. I think there was really only one game where we went up early in the first 5-10 minutes and then kind of ran right a little bit in that game. But there were too many games we found ourselves behind in that first 30 minutes. And I feel like chasing the game changed our mentality within games. And that it comes from me. I've got to be better in that area of saying, if we stay true to how we want to play, it doesn't matter if it's minute 1 or minute 90, we'll find a way to win a game. So I think it was struggling with how we wanted to approach games as opposed to the killer instinct, but I think that came into it a little bit as well.
Yeah. Could you just talk a little bit about the Atlantic East, like sort of the makeup of it, sort of where you think from a competitive standpoint? I know you mentioned Newman, who I've driven by campus before. I've got to stop one of these days, but just your perspective on the conference and relative strength, that sort of thing.
I mean, it's definitely a conference that's growing. I think from a competitive standpoint, the good thing is since the Atlantic East started in 2018, for men's soccer, we've had 4 different champions.
Oh, wow.
So it shows, Newman are the only team who have won 2. We've won 1, Cabrini and Marymount. So it shows how competitive and close it is. I do think, we have a lot of work to do if we want to try and compete on a regional and then eventually a national level. But even there, in the tournament the last couple of years, games have gone from the Atlantic East teams to overtime, or they've been beaten by 1 goal. So we're definitely moving in the right direction as a conference. As a new conference in 2018, it's always going to take time to grow. But I do think that it is so competitive, and that's helping the standard grow. And we are competing and beating some regionally and nationally ranked teams amongst the top end of our conference.
But are you at a point? I don't know if this is the right question phrased properly, so I apologize if it's not. Like your schedule, your out of conference schedule. Like, do you have a method to it? And the only reason why I'm asking that is because I know, right? Like everyone talks strength of schedule and where you're going to be, and so who you're playing and all that. And so I'm just curious, do you have a method to the madness, or are you like, hey, we just want to play diverse teams that different styles? I mean, you play a landmark, NJAC, yeah, and a couple landmarks now, right? No,
Yeah, and even
yeah,
next year, a couple of new games for us.
yeah,
So I think strength of schedule is key.
hmm,
You know, for us as a conference to keep growing, we have to look at that. So,
hmm,
I'll be honest, 2018 and 2019 might have been less in terms of strength of schedule. We
hmm,
wanted to find games where we could, give ourselves a realistic opportunity to win,
hmm,
help recruitment, I guess, by having positive records or as
hmm,
close to as possible. Really, the last couple of years for us has been trying to challenge ourselves
hmm,
in that non-conference. So
yeah,
strength of schedule one, we want to make sure our SOS is high, and I'm
hmm,
learning more about that. I'm on the regional advisory committee now, so
hmm,
that's been huge for me personally. We do want to mix the teams we play and the styles we play.
hmm,
So we want to play against some possession-based teams, some low block counter-attacking
hmm,
teams, some high press teams.
hmm,
We need to be able to solve problems through those games and really
yeah,
know who we are in conference. Um, and then finally, we do obviously want to consider our record of making sure we're not going a season with only one or two wins. We want to make sure we're
yeah, yeah,
competitive
yeah,
in terms of that as well. So I think
yeah.
they're the main aspects we look at.
Yeah, I guess that's always the balance, right? Is you want a strength of schedule, but you don't want to get kicked in the teeth every single game. And after a
Exactly.
while, it's like, what's the point of strength of schedule if you're getting crushed every game? That's not a necessarily a good thing. It- Is who was the toughest team you faced? Uh,
Last season?
yeah.
Oh, that's a great question. The team we struggled the most with was Asinus. They kind of different style to us, but they did a tremendous job of imposing their style in the
Mm-hmm.
first half, and they killed the game off by halftime.
Yeah.
So in terms of imposing them, I would say that they were our toughest opposition.
Mm-hmm.
They beat up on us early, and we just couldn't get back in the game.
Yeah.
And I thought Dan there did a great job of getting them to play how he wants them to play.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also thought Rutgers Camden were outstanding. That was probably the craziest game I've ever been involved in. Um, but I thought they were ruthless in front of
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah.
And their first few opportunities they converted and really put us behind the curve as well.
Mm.
So they're the two that jump out at me.
What What's I don't know if this is a good question to ask, but because now everybody's watching, but like, what style do you hate going up against that makes you? I don't know if it's like your team struggle or you just, every coach has got that where, that there's that passionate side of you. You're like, oh, I can't believe I'm going up against this. How are we going to break it down?
If I answer this and people see it, they're going to know how to prepare, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think I'll go back to a sinus. What they did really well in the first 15 minutes
Mm-hmm.
is disrupt our ability to build how we wanted to and
Mm-hmm.
how we wanted to establish possession. So it didn't matter where they let us get to with the ball on the field, we were constantly under pressure.
Pressure,
It,
yeah.
you know, they weren't necessarily focused on their first presser winning it or their second. They were
Mm-hmm.
just relentless, um, and didn't want to give us time to settle in and impose ourselves. So I always enjoy the games where it's a little more structured, possession based,
Yeah,
tactical. But at
yeah,
the same time, I felt like I learned a lot after that first half against the Sinus that helped us, probably in that month immediately after we played them. So
yeah.
um, they're always tough to coach because you're trying to get your guys to settle, relax, believe in what we're trying to do, and yet they get maybe a second on the ball to make decisions.
Yeah.
Um, so they're not always fun during the game, but they're always fun to watch back and see, right, what can we do better? How can we structure ourselves to give our guys almost predetermined decisions to get out of those pressing
Yeah.
situations? But yeah, they're the games that are hard when you're in them.
Yeah, those are the ones. That's the strength of schedule that I think of, right? Like going up against teams that, you know, they don't necessarily. It's not going to sound right, but that aren't necessarily better than you, but that play in a way that challenge you the most,
Yeah.
right? And that I think is what I envision strength of schedule, right? It's not a score; it is a, yeah, we're playing McDaniel. McDaniel does this. This is really hard for us, and then how do we solve for that? And then we're playing Ursinus. They press us all over the field. Well, how do we solve for that, right? That to me is real strength of schedule, right? That's
It is, and it's trying to solve the problems that each team
yeah,
brings.
yeah,
And I think, particularly early in the season, that always fascinates me because you can't prepare as well when you've only got 1 or 2 game
yeah,
films to watch. Um, so it is you're trying to learn who we're going to be through the season. And I do believe every team has to go through some adversity at this level.
yeah,
It's very rare that a team's going to win 18, 19, 20 games in a row, and dominate at a level like ours.
yeah,
So you kind of want to know how you guys bounce back from disappointment as well as manage their success because you learn more about their character that way. It's
yeah,
never fun to go through, but it's nice to see how
yeah,
they respond.
yeah. Like I said, you're never gonna get anywhere if it's easy. Like you just never. It just doesn't work that way. You have to challenge yourself one way or the other. It's got to be your games, they have to be a challenge because otherwise your team's full or teams full, not yours, but teams will fold because they're not accustomed to that being challenged in the course of a game. It, it, where where is your sort of like your recruiting zone area? Are you mostly around that Philadelphia area, the Eastern
Yeah,
PA, I'll say?
I think if you look at our area, we're lucky that we have some big clubs right on our
Yeah,
doorstep. So Penn Fusion, FC Delco, Yuki's, for example,
yeah,
are all right there. So we always try and establish a relationship, with those clubs because you can get some tremendous players.
mm,
Right now, our roster is kind of heavily built up of New Jersey kids.
yeah,
Again, I think that is EDP have a ton of events in this area, and that's right in
mm,
our wheelhouse.
mm,
We are looking at how we can branch out a little bit more, particularly now with ECNL really taking off. For example, on the boys'
mm,
side, how can we get to the various ECNL events, and how can we kind of widen that recruitment? So, right now I am talking to a recruit from Texas.
wow,
Weirdly, I am talking to a 2025 from England. Whether we can get him over here is a different thing.
yeah,
So we're trying to branch out as much as possible. I have a kid coming in this year from New York. I have a kid from
mm,
North Carolina right now. We're slowly branching out, but yeah, heavily right now is kind of that Greater Philly area,
yeah,
New Jersey, or
yeah.
maybe even Delaware.
I keep thinking in my head like just because of the scarcity of Division 3 down south and then that on the West Coast, like I think kids are more accustomed to, hey, all right, I'll go halfway across the country for school, um, than in back in my day, which was a bigger deal, right? Like I think it's so I could totally see why you're going to different places that are non customary. How did you connect with the kid in England?
Um,
Not that your accent has anything to do with it, but like,
Honestly, it's a great question. I'm trying to think. We've been talking for a little while now, so I'm
yeah,
trying to think of that first communication.
yeah,
I think initially they were kind of coming out to various schools in this area,
uh huh,
exploring whether they wanted to come out to college in the US.
yeah,
It is so different from
yeah,
university in England, for example. So I think one was them looking at a different variety of schools, some smaller schools like us, some
uh
bigger
huh,
schools, a mix of D1, D2, D3.
yeah,
So I think initially it was just they reached out kind of to a ton of different coaches.
uh huh,
Um, the England aspect intrigued me. I I'm not too familiar with the club he plays for in England.
Uh-huh.
But I also thought, as an English coach, even if he wasn't interested here, maybe I can help him and guide him a little bit into
Uh-huh.
to the US market.
Yeah.
He kind of liked my vision for the program and how we try and play,
Uh-huh.
and we've kind of just stayed in touch from there.
Yeah.
So
Oh, very good. All right. I Can you just, because you mentioned it and it got me thinking, can can you just talk about the difference between high level between I'm a soccer player in England. I want to continue to keep playing, but I also want to go to school. How that's structured there versus obviously here, I can go to a school and then be on the school team and compete and do all that.
yeah, I mean, certainly when I was there, kind of college university sports, uh, you had the opportunity to play, and you obviously played some high level teams, high level players, but it was, to be quite honest, the social side of it was a big pull for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
The university sport itself wasn't really big. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Totally different to here. So when I was at university, I still played on a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So I played for my college team midweek on a Wednesday. We only played one game a week, and then I played for my semi-pro team on a Saturday. But my weekend team was my priority.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of very different to here, where I love the fact that you can be a student athlete here. You can
Mm-hmm.
really balance your academics and focus on getting the best degree possible, but playing at the highest level possible for another 4 or 5 years as well. And I do think even at our level, we're going to start to get more kids who explore it as an opportunity. They have to consider the financial side, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But it's such a different experience here, and I really do think a more positive experience here that more and more international kids are going to explore it.
I I lived in Spain, um, and I tell people all the time. I don't think people realize how unique the athletics college university system is in the world. Like it's not. It's just not. It's nothing comparable. And I
There
do
really
think,
isn't.
yeah,
Um,
it's
I,
remarkable.
yeah, it is. It's tremendous, and I think it gives the kids here a great opportunity to
Yeah,
balance both academics and play a sport they love.
yeah. Um, Yeah, because this is just the whole thing is unique, and I will say two things. I think the commitment now that you make at any level in college, from a soccer standpoint, has gotten greater and greater, and it's made the sport, it made the soccer better. And I think to your point, I think kids over in Europe, well, around the world, not just Europe, but I think the kids around the world are looking at like, I want to play soccer. I also want to get an education, and where can I play at a level that's, for all intents, as competitive can be. And then they look to the United States and be like, I could do both at the same time, right? And I think that's a very big draw.
It is, and outside the academies or the kind of established clubs
Yeah,
somewhere like England, it really is difficult to balance both. But even then, the academies primarily they want to get pro players from it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
you're not balancing the academic side anywhere near as much as here.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you've said it best. It's unique. I don't know any other country like this in
no,
terms of that
yeah,
college model.
yeah. All right, so why I, Immaculata is a unique place, right? For those who don't know, it is a school of faith, right? It's Catholic tradition, beautiful campus. Your main building was spectacular, um, but just 30-second elevator pitch. What's unique about Immaculata from your standpoint, and what do you tell kids that are looking that are knocking on your door saying, "Hey, I'm interested in Immaculata and playing"?
I think the first thing is you try and sell the campus, which
Yeah.
for me is easy because like you've said, you get the mix of the beautiful buildings and the architecture,
Yeah.
and our administration really have done a nice job of kind of modernising campus at the same time without
Mm,
losing our identity.
yeah.
So if you're ever back in this area, I'll take you around to some of the stuff that you didn't get to see. So
Mm,
we have a tremendous esports arena.
uh-huh.
Um, our turf was put in 2020, so in lockdown, and a new track put around
Yeah.
it.
I
A
tried to
new
get in, but the gates were closed. to this stadium, like I wasn't gonna hop a fence. I'll hurt myself if I try to
Yeah,
hop
that
a
fence is
fence.
pretty high as
Yeah,
well. But a new science pavilion was put in
yeah,
last year. There's a big push now for cybersecurity within
yeah,
that. So I think the campus itself is a nice mix for people of the kind of older buildings and the architecture and a kind of modern feeling and sense to it as well.
hmm,
The other aspect for me is the area. It is close enough to the city that you can
yeah,
kind of get in, you can go and see the sports teams. So the
yeah,
guys love to go to the Union games, the Phillies games, etc. And you're also far enough out of the city that if that's not your scene, you're not kind of in that, busy environment. So
yeah,
I think you get a great mix. And then you get some other colleges in the area, so you get to see kids from other areas. So Westchester's 10 minutes down the road,
hmm,
and that's a kind of great city as well. So I think for me the campus and the area is a surprise to a lot of people.
yeah,
Um, and then we really are, as a department, trying to make a push on the quality of our programs and winning
hmm,
more championships. And I think we've
hmm,
done that over the last few years. We're nowhere near where we want to be. But
yeah,
when kids see that you want to push and be successful, you're not just here to make up numbers. They
hmm,
want to be a part of that.
yeah. I I was really surprised. Like I said, again, not knowing um, how close you were to Philly, and just the and it's beautiful, like sitting on top of almost like the hill overlooking. It's pretty wild, and much larger than I anticipated, right? Or spread out, right? Because you have so much land, and I guess it's not an urban campus. It is, as you know, like you're surprised that there's a major metropolitan city 20 minutes away, and you're
Yeah,
in the thick of it, right? And because you don't even know, you think you're in a wooded area,
it is. I mean, for me, being English, where I grew up, it's open fields, a lot of
mm-hmm.
green, and you get that here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was nice for me to kind of see
Yeah,
as well. It's almost like a home away from home.
yeah. You said something I thought was interesting, that the administration is, not your words, the ones I'm making up in my head, are like, made a commitment to athletics and to improving athletics and the facilities. And clearly when you walk around facility wise, I mean, it's as modern as they come, right? And I, I'm just curious, is that obviously intentional? Is there something about Immaculata that the administration, whether it's the AD or the president, is like, hey, we want to ramp up our athletic programs? I mean, generally, not just soccer, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously the women's basketball team here won the national title in the 70s, 72,
Hmm.
73, 74.
Hmm.
They made the movie, The Mighty
Yeah.
Max.
Yeah.
Um, so, from there, there's always been a kind of focus on athletics.
Hmm.
Our VP has an athletic background,
Hmm.
and that, obviously helps as well. And I think right now, let's be honest, athletics is a good way to
Yeah.
recruit kids into a school, and when everyone is facing some challenges post
Yeah.
COVID. I think athletics is a way of boosting
Hmm.
recruitment. So I think it's a couple of things. We are also lucky. Our president is probably at 90% of the athletic events,
Hmm.
and she's as passionate as they come about the sports here. So I was actually standing next to her on Wednesday night at our basketball games.
Nice.
So when you have somebody as involved, it's
Yeah.
great, and there's that push as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's something that intrigues me a lot. It goes hand in hand with where you hire with the purpose, right? Because I think a lot of schools, to your point about facing challenges, right? Like there's things coming down the next 5 years that are scaring a lot of folks. That athletics is the easy route. I don't want to say easy route 'cause it's not easy, but it's the hey, if we can really put a spotlight on athletics and bring in the student athletes, it can only help, right? And raise the profile and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
there's never going to be a shortage of athletes, I think. So
no,
it's an
yeah,
area of focus for
agreed,
sure.
agreed. Um, have you started spring yet? You haven't started your spring practices yet?
No, we haven't. We actually begin. I'm going to check my calendar now. We begin in a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously this will be the first spring with the kind of change
Yeah.
in the rules of number of events and things we're allowed.
Uh-huh.
Um, so we'll go slightly longer than previous years, but I still want to keep it condense and maybe go more events within that shorter time frame than expand the time frame and only do 1 or 2 events a week. So we begin just after our Easter break. So we'll begin that kind of end of the first week of March.
What do you, knowing you're on this trajectory, what is your thinking around the spring? What do you hope to accomplish? Where do you hope to get to?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, we always say that, championships are won within that next kind of 2 months, because you can either do the work now to get ahead of the curve, or you're going to be playing catch up come middle of August when we start.
Yeah.
So one is you always want to kind of reestablish your standards, in terms of, how we approach training, the mentality, the intensity. So week 1 will be kind of reconnecting with the guys and setting those standards again. From there's always that big push on the physical element. Through pre-season, we'll do as much as we can with a ball at our feet, because, why would I send the guys on long runs? That's not the way we play the game. So I want the intensity of training and the fitness to match how we're going to play. And then it really is, I look at how do I want us to play this fall that extends us from last season, and what do I need to establish now? So it will be kind of breaking down our game model, looking at the key components and really focusing there on, what do I want to achieve through pre-season and how can I get ahead of the curve going into that?
And how's the recruiting going for you? Like, where are you at in that recruiting process, knowing full well that the whole FAFSA mess, financial aid, is not helping? I get that. Like,
that's definitely delayed things. We are still wrapping up our 24 class. All offers and everything have been made. We're pretty much there. We're kind of 90% of the way there. But this is definitely the latest. We've been openly recruiting incoming for this year. We are now heavily focused on 2025s. So the next 3 weekends are big events for us. So we'll be out Saturday, Sunday over the next 3 weekends, really pushing some 25s, trying to get some on our radar. Watching the kids who have maybe reached out to us as well. But yeah, I mean, you said it, FAFSA and the delay there has kind of changed the landscape a little bit this year. So we are still filling our last couple of roster spots for 24.
All right. Lastly, do you think Arsenal's going to win it?
No. I hope not. If they win it, I don't think I can stay in touch with some of my friends in England.
Yeah, you're already a turncoat. They're kind of like a little skeptical of you.
I liked the Postecoglou interview. Was it last weekend or the weekend before, where he was asked, so it looks like this will be the first year in a while you're not going to win a trophy, and his response was, "Oh, so you don't think we can win the league then?" No, I mean, I think City still have to be big favourites.
Yeah.
Their strength in depth and the fact they're getting Haaland back, De Bruyne back, they're going to be a different animal.
They're going to be. You even see it, like you saw them play this past weekend, and you could see they're not totally in sync, but when they do click, you're like, they're just so good.
They are. Just the way they control games.
Oh my gosh.
When they're on, they'll be 3 up by halftime, and even when they're off, they grind you down because they've got the ball 90% of the time.
Yeah. And just make you run. I love that.
Like I said, Liverpool are going to push them. I think
I do think
that go in, they have that extra motivation, but just the way they play, you're never comfortable playing against Liverpool.
No. Yeah. They'll and there's something to be said about Liverpool, Man City, right? They're not comfortable with that game either, right? So
exactly. It'll be interesting, but no, I have Arsenal finishing maybe third, but hopefully behind us, and we're third.
All right, Coach. Hey, thank you very much for this. Really do appreciate the time. Like I said, wonderful campus. Really enjoyed it. I will next time I'm out. I'm out there. I'll definitely figure out where your office is, and I'll stop by, say hello.
Yeah, send me a message beforehand. We'll catch up for sure. No, I appreciate the opportunity. It's been great talking, so thank you very much.
Thank you.